With the introduction of the atomic editor in Elementor, we have to learn 3 new concepts: variables, classes and components. These are well-known concepts from the development world, but many no-coders like me didn't know them. But it is incredibly powerful when it comes to global styling, but also in terms of workflow, because it allows you to build a lot faster. And not only that, setting up variables and classes properly will also help AI agents in the future to understand your website so it can help you to build, if you're into that. So let's learn about it together. Before we get into details, let's first start with the big idea. In variables, you can store values. Inside of classes, you group them. And components are just a bunch of widgets or elements together. Let's make it a little bit more visual. So, the idea behind variables is that anything you put into an input field can be saved as a global value. In the old version of Elementor, we could already do some stuff. For example, our colors were already a kind of variable system, but most other input fields didn't have any way to save the values you use in a global way. But now, in the atomic editor, you can save any value as a variable, and it's using this 3-bowl ice cream icon, or what is it exactly? I don't know, but you see them over here. If you hover, you can select them in any field. And so if we use the same variable in 2 widgets, we can manage it from one place. And again, in v3, we basically only had this for our colors. For typography though, we also had a kind of system for it. So let's take a look at this example. This is a card and there's a bunch of widgets here, right? There's an image, there's some heading widgets. And for any kind of text layers, we could link that to a global typography setting with this little globe icon. And that worked, kind of. But the problem with this approach was that all of the values were saved to one name. A few years ago, I made a big video about this, explaining how to set up this whole system, and a lot of people are still using that method. But this is not a very flexible system, because let's say you want to change the weight for all of your title sizes or the font family, then you have to go in to every single custom font. That also meant that you had to go to the site settings, which then reloaded your whole builder. Sometimes there were CSS issues. They did improve it at some point with this panel, but then you had to save and leave. The whole builder reloaded again. And again, all of that data was connected to one global custom font. And actually, that feature, custom fonts, was not even built for it. This feature was actually built to add more font families to your website, but this was the only way we could style our typography if we didn't want the styling to be connected to our semantic tags. But now we have a much better solution with Atomic version 4, and that is variables. So we can separate all of these values: the text color, the font size, the font family. And you can of course also still decide to use local values, to not save something under a variable. So the name of the variable is then heading, but inside there's the font family pop-ins. And so if you apply this variable to all of your heading fonts, then all you have to do is just go to your variables, change your font family there, and it will change in all the headings on your website. So here's what that looks like in the builder. I have a heading over here. I connect it to the heading font. All of the other headings on my website also are connected to the variable. So now if I change the font in that variable, all of my headings will change. Awesome. No reloading, no site settings, just here in the builder. And so this is already a superior system, but if you then want to apply that to another heading, you have to go in here again to typography and then link it, or as in v3, you can copy and paste the style, and then it will also apply that same heading font. We can solve that with classes, but let's first talk about what we can actually do with variables, because there are 3 options. The first one is colors. Like I already showed, this replaced the site settings color, so we don't have to go to the site settings anymore. We just manage the color straight in the builder. Just looks a little bit different, but it's also a pop-up. You can search in there, which wasn't the case in v3. And you can easily go to the manager over here and manage all of your colors. But as you can already see, there's not only colors saved in the variables, also other things. I showed you this one. You can save your font family under a variable. I highly recommend that. Very nice. And then the last one is number values, but this is only in Pro. And this is where you can do some really fun stuff with clamps that automatically shrink down from desktop to mobile. But you can also just put in a rem or a pixel value. I have created a whole system for myself here. We're not going to get into that right now, but all you have to know is that you can do these three things with variables. So again, connected to single input fields. Okay, now we can talk about classes. Classes group values. These can be dumb values like normal numbers or smart values like variables. So you save them under one name. So let's take a look at this example again. Here we have two cards and both of these cards have this heading widget or heading element. They call it elements over here. Here it says widgets. Anyways, it's the same thing. So now we have grouped all of these values under one name in this example called title 4, because this title is the fourth largest on my website. And there's 3 variables connected here and 1 normal value. And then all I have to do is to go to this other card, apply this class, and then all of these values, including variables, will be applied over here. So this is the ultimate flexibility. It takes a little bit more setup at the beginning, but once you do it, you can control everything from that class. So let's take a look at a real example. We can see this title here. This is the second biggest title I have. You can use all of these input fields and even use variables right here, but that only saves it in this widget. And then if you want to apply it to another widget, you have to go into these fields again. But now I have saved these values inside of the class. So you can see there's multiple variables linked right here for the color, heading font, even a size, which is actually a clamp. So if I want to apply all of these values to this heading, I just go in here, I just select my title 2, and there you go. All of it is linked. And once I make a change here, the old one also changes. Total global control. Let's now go a level further, because you can also apply multiple classes to one widget. So in this situation, I separated the text color in another class called heading dark. And I didn't have to do this, but it gives me more flexibility, because now that the color is separated from the size of my main titles, which I use for my heading widgets, what I can do is only save the text color that I use for all of my headings on dark backgrounds in that one class. So here I just dragged in a new heading. First, let me apply the size, in this example, title 2, but there's no color yet. If I would add that color over here, then of course that would also change all of my other headings that have that size, which is not what I want. So I'm going to clean this one up with this cleaning icon right here. Okay, I'm not going to save that in the class. I have a separate class called heading light, and in that one I connect the color. It looks like these variables are also connected in this class, but that's not the case. And we can see that by these new indicators. If we click on here, we can see that the size, the font size, is actually coming from the class title 2, which is correct. And then if we click on this one, we will probably see that this one turns gray. Yeah, because that color is actually not in title 2, but is in heading light. So now I have separated those better. But what happens now if I change title 2 to another color? Let's try a weird one, for example this one. It doesn't change this title, but it does change this one. Why is that? Well, that's because the class that is most on top basically rules, it decides. And local is the absolute highest class, so that one overrules everything. So it doesn't matter what we do over here, because it will always listen to the one that is higher. So now if I would go to local and I would do something even more crazy, that would be the one that Elementor listens to. But you cannot change the order from here. You cannot drag and drop. And you do that in the classes manager. In the classes manager, you basically decide what is on top. You can drag these handles right here and then change its position. So in this way, you can basically build your own system, which is very nice. Here's another example. I have this button over here, which is button solid. This has some settings. And then there's another button over here, which has the outline button. And in the outline button, I'm using some of the same settings from the main button solid so that I don't have to set up the padding of all of the buttons 2 times, but I then use different settings in here. For example, a transparent background and a different border. And that's because in my classes manager, the button outline is on top of button solid. And again, you can keep it as simple as you want. You don't have to do all of these things, but I'm just showing you what is possible if you want a really good system. Okay, so the class who is on top wins, manageable from the classes manager, and the local is the ultimate boss. Okay, so we now talked mainly about heading widgets, but what about other widgets? For example, containers. So here we have the same example, but now we're not looking at the heading widget, we're selecting this white container. It's now a div block or a flex box, but to keep things easy, I'm just calling it container. So in this case, the position is vertical on a local level because I also have cards that are in horizontal. And then in that card, I use the same padding. I use the same rounded corners and I use the same background. And I also use that background light 1 for the actual background color of my sections. Why would I not reuse it? So if I want the most light background that is connected to my variable, which is pure white, then I just select background light 1, whether it's a card or a main section. The rounded corners, border radius, I use that in multiple places on the website. So I just created a class. And if you don't want to go this deep and you just want to combine things, then you can also make a card 1 dark that has all of the styling for the dark card and a card 1 light if you find that easier. You can make it as crazy as you want. Here's another example with this icon that shows you don't always have to save information in a class because every icon is different. You often need to change the size of the icon because every icon is a little bit different. So if this is the only place on the website where I use this icon, then you don't have to make a class. But for icons like this, it's probably the case that that icon appears on multiple places. So then it would be smart to make a class called arrow right and then move this value into that class. But the icon hover is a separate class because I use that on all of my icons because I want them to have the same little hover animation. So I hope that that all made sense so far. And these are guides, these are not rules. It really depends on your situation, but generally speaking, the more you use variables and classes, the better. But you also have to get into it. You have to start learning it. You cannot have a perfect system from day one. I am preparing a system which I'm going to share soon, but many people will make their own systems as well. Okay, let's now talk about components. Components are basically containers that lock widgets and elements together, while classes and variables and local styles still control the styling. Yeah, this is a bit crazy, but a component is basically just a whole bunch of widgets together. And a component itself is always a container or a flex box or a div block. So here you can see an example of a component. In the layers panel, it just looks like one thing, but if I go inside of it by double clicking, you can see that it's actually a card, which is a flex box, which contains all of these things, which you can then reuse. In this example, we're making a real estate website, so here it would actually make more sense to use a loop item and link it up to dynamic content, but take a look at this example. Here we have these numbers. So let's say that I want to make this title bigger. I could of course go in and change the class, but then I also have to change the class on this title and this title and this title. But because I turn this into components, I can just go in right now, change the title here to something bigger. So let's pick title 2. And then once I go outside of it, all of the other ones also update in size because they're all linked to the same component. So this gives you another level of global control. And another benefit is that you can tell inside of a component which items you want the client to edit. So here you can see that the client can only edit this text. It cannot select any other classes, and this works if your client is on the editor WordPress role. So you can just go to any container or a flexbox or div block and turn it into a component. So yeah, it's just basically a bunch of widgets connected together under one name. Great for client management, but also for repeating content. As I said over here, when there's repeating content and it's not dynamic, then components are great. But components will also only be for Elementor Pro users. So let's go back to the beginning. As we have learned, variables are just single values stored that you can reuse. With classes, you group these values together, whether they are DOM values or smart variable values. And in components, you combine all of these widgets with all of these variables and classes inside of them into one thing. So now the question, of course, becomes, what variables and classes do you create? Like I already said, I am creating a system myself, but here I just want to say that everybody will have a different system. There will probably be multiple content creators who offer their own kind of system. There will be agencies who create their own kinds of systems. People get very passionate about their own systems. I'm creating a more simplified framework system for people like me, more like no-coders, not too broad, because some people create like hundreds of classes and variables. I don't think that that's what we need. So get subscribed if you are interested in that. I really hope that this gave some clarity and that you liked this video. As always, let me know what you want to see next, and then I will see you in the next video.